Hello everyone, and welcome to this introduction to Uphill by Christina Rossetti. Rossetti wrote Uphill in 1858. It was published a couple of years later in 1861 as part of the Goblin Market and Other Poems collection. Interesting because of the non-devotional nature of those poems, whereas arguably this one has a strong devotional aspect. We'll look at that more closely in a moment once we've read it. Uphill by Christina Rossetti. Does the road wind uphill all the way? Yes, to the very end. Will the day's journey take the whole long day? From morn to night, my friend. But is there for the night a resting place? A roof for when the slow dark hours begin? May not the darkness hide it from my face? You cannot miss that inn. Shall I meet other wayfarers at night? Those who have gone before? Then I must knock or call when just in sight. They will not keep you standing at that door. Shall I find comfort, travel sore and weak? Of labour you shall find the sum. Will there be beds for me and all who seek? Yea, beds for all who come. So on the face of it, a fairly straightforward message, although one that could be read, I think, a couple of ways, and you might have seen a couple more. We've got a poem that's very clearly structured with two narrative voices, and the rhyme scheme aids us to an understanding who's who and what's what. With the AB rhyme scheme, the speaker who is asking the questions is given the A rhyme, and the speaker who is answering the questions is given the B rhyme all the way through. So that helps keeps things neat and clear. We don't have any doubt as to who's speaking. Another thing which differentiates the speakers is, of course, that the speaker A is asking a series of questions and the speaker B is answering those questions. This is two different people. Now, one way to read this poem is that it's using the old metaphor of a hard life as being a bit of an uphill struggle. It's a metaphor that we're familiar with and is in kind of our vernacular today. Using the metaphor of a road winding uphill to represent one's life. Now, I think this is to be differentiated from another similar metaphor, which is the metaphor of the road less travelled, which is, as you'll know, the idea that there's an easy way of going about life and then there's a tougher way, which is implied in the saying, has a richer set of rewards. That road less travelled is the one where you make the more exciting discoveries. I don't think this is that kind of path. This seems to be a fairly well-worn path, a road along which many people travel, which suggests that it might be just that life itself is a bit of an uphill slog at times. So the speaker A begins with the first of many questions. Does the road wind uphill all the way? Very definite implications of hardship, that life is hard. Now, looking at the dates here, we can contextualise this as the period during which Rossetti is working with those fallen women in Highgate. She would have been working with people whose lives were very hard, and perhaps that informs the theme of this poem. Look at the difference between the structure of each line, speaker by speaker. If you were to look at this poem visually and answer a question, which of the speakers is more uncertain, which of the speakers is more confident, it's very clear that speaker A is very uncertain and seeking reassurance, and speaker B is much more self-assured, not least because they're not asking questions. We've got this much shorter line with the end stop at the end, which gives it a sense of assurance or confidence. Does the road wind uphill all the way? Yes, to the very end. Full stop. Will the day's journey take the whole long day? From morn to night, my friend. Now here, the second question from speaker A adds an extra syllable to what otherwise would match the meter count of line 1. It adds an extra bit of uncertainty, I think, to that line. The question goes on a little bit too long. If we got rid of the word whole, then the number of beats in line 3 would match the number of beats in line 1. But Rossetti adds that extra syllable, whole or long, the extra syllable, which just extends the sense of needing a reassurance a little bit. And then the answer comes from morn to night, my friend. Now, The comma here I don't think acts really as a caesura. It's more the kind of comma that you'd put in front of somebody's name if you were writing a sentence including their name, just to separate the idea of knight from the familiar term of address that she's using, my friend. So using the word my friend introduces a kind of closeness or a sense of care or relationship between these two. We don't know what that is. We don't know who the speakers are supposed to be. As we read on, we might have some ideas. Second stanza. But is there for the night a resting place, a roof for when the slow dark hours begin? May not the darkness hide it from my face? You cannot miss that inn. So stanza 2 introduces the idea of a stage of rest on the journey. Now, those of you who are reading this metaphor, this extended metaphor, as an allegory for life's journey, when one's resting place then surely is death, which is odd because the suggestion is that this is an inn for the night and therefore the journey carries on tomorrow. But that's for something for you to think about. So is this inn a metaphor for death, or is it a metaphor for comfortable rest on life's journey? May not the darkness hide it from my face. So we've got the idea of a hard journey. We've got a note of darkness coming here, where if we're looking at the resting place as being death, then surely that darkness starts to foreshadow that death with a bit of sort of pathetic fallacy. I'll just write that down before I forget it. Okay, you cannot miss that inn. Now, those of us who know our Christmas story will make associations with that inn, with perhaps the inn at which Mary and Joseph call in on their search for somewhere to stay for that Christmas Eve, and the eventual stable in which the baby Jesus is born. So inns have a definite kind of biblical echo. There's a definite reassurance about this inn. You're not going to miss it. Don't worry, you won't miss it. Stanza 3, shall I meet other wayfarers at night, those who have gone before? So again, there's a real sense of this journey, this road, this inn as being allegorical, and that the resting place is that final resting place, or perhaps heaven. Then I must knock or call when just in sight. They will not keep you standing at that door. So the door here is that familiar image that's been used in several of the poems in the collection. Sometimes it's a door to Eden, sometimes it's a door to heaven. Here it's a door to an inn with a kind of symbolic door to God's kingdom or the final resting place, passing through the door to the other side. But you won't be kept waiting at it. We've had doors that are locked, we've had doors that are open one way, and now we've got a door that's readily open. So there's an interesting thematic or image parallel between several of the poems. Shall I find comfort, travel sore and weak? Okay, some more imagery here of the hardships of the journey, of life's journey. You're sore, you're seeking comfort, you are weak. Again, comfort and weakness are beginning to introduce a familiar biblical semantic field. The weak are invited, the meek shall inherit the earth, the idea of those who are in need being welcome in the kingdom of heaven. And of labour you shall find the sum is the answer to that question. So will I find comfort? Of labour you will find the sum. So does that mean you will find the peaceful rest from life's labours? Or will you find the sum of life's labours? In other words, are you going to receive your just reward? Is it relative to the amount of labour that you've done in your life, the degree of comfort that you find at the end? Will there be beds for me and all who seek? Again, this is slightly interesting with the image of the inn, because an inn is not private residence, and an inn is by definition somewhere where you can find lodging for the night. So the fact that the speaker is so uncertain that he or she doesn't know whether or not there's going to be any beds in the inn is quite strange. And yea, beds for all who come. So I think the yea and for all who come also has a kind of religious echo that remind us of Rossetti's Christian beliefs. Now, there's a couple more aspects of this poem which we can make direct biblical parallels to. One is the idea of the inn itself and the knocking on the door and being allowed in. And the kingdom of heaven is often referred by Jesus as my Father's house. So that idea of being let into a house where you'll be welcomed and comforted is part of the imagery of the Bible. And also this note of if you seek, you shall find. So if you're looking for God, you will be found. For all who come, there are beds. There's room in my Father's house for all, Jesus said. So why then is this poem not released with the other devotional poems, such as Good Friday in the Prince's Progress, the Saints' Day or the Feast Day poems that she released, instead appearing with Goblin Market and other non-devotional poems? You could argue then that the fact of that publication suggests that this poem is not designed to be read as a devotional poem, and that the spiritual allusions or the Christian imagery is by the by. Now, if you're raised in a faith as Christina Rossetti was, your interpretation of spirituality is going to take the narrative form of the religion in which you were raised. So she's going to see certain narratives in those terms and express herself in that way. So perhaps even though she's not including this as a devotional poem and not meaning this to be read in order to support the faith of the reader, as we read it, we can see that imagery and that kind of spirituality obviously informs her natural communication. Or is this poem deliberately secular in the sense that it doesn't mention God, there's no capitalized pronouns, there are no explicit mentions of anything in the semantic field of religion? Is it then being offered by Rossetti as a comfort to people in a worldly hardship? The idea that they will be offered rest, they will be looked after, which again reminds us of the work that Rossetti was doing at this point in her life with those women who were very much down on their luck. In terms of other aspects of structure, very regular. We've got the AB throughout. We've got the 4 stanzas with the question, answer, no variety there. We've got some adjustments in the meter where sometimes the answer is very short to assert confidence, and sometimes the question is longer to communicate that uncertainty. But otherwise quite a straightforward poem. Straightforward because we are familiar already with the uphill struggle of life analogy. Familiar also, or straightforward also, because the tone of the poem is consistent. The A speaker maintains that questioning, uncertain, doubtful tone, and the answer narrator, speaker B, is assertive and confident, although comforting and reassuring with that "my friend" and "yes, you'll be welcome" and don't worry that runs throughout the poem. So you'll be making connections with this and others. You could choose a point of imagery to compare it with others. For example, this is a door poem, isn't it, in some sense? You could use this as a poem to compare and contrast with the explicitly religious poems. I'm thinking Good Friday, Shut Out, which also has a kind of allegorical, biblical set of images in it. Lots to think about. Lastly, we must consider whether this is Rossetti offering comfort to the listener, but also comfort to herself. The women that she's working with were certainly experiencing hardships. What about Rossetti? What's her frame of mind as she's writing this poem? Is she comforting herself? And that'll be something for you to explore in your context reading for where was she and what headspace was she in when she wrote Uphill in 1858. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.